Hello, everyone. My name is Carol Richardson, and I lead the Akashic Awakening Circle and Metaphysical Book Study here at Akashic Awakening Academy. So, this past Sunday, we had a gathering, and beautiful events occurred. So, right now, I'm going to speak about two different topics that are interwoven. One, what the universe asked me to do and on Sunday in our circle and what happened in our circle. And I'm going to contrast it with a post I saw on Instagram. And I apologize, I don't know if you call it a story, a reel, or a post. It was a video. To give credit, I think the original source may have been Redneck Papa from Lexington, Kentucky. The video was someone saying, "This is the Vacation Bible School event my children are here experiencing." And the video was taken apparently at, I think it was Mount Olivet Church in Lexington, Kentucky. And the children were in a sanctuary in the rows of the pews in their seats. And in came, I don't know, two or three gentlemen in army fatigues and with rifles, making popping sounds, not actual gun sounds, but popping sounds. And they had a black person or a black faced person whom they had on the ground on the floor, and they were shooting at this person, and they were teaching the children, or someone was leading the children, teaching them to chant, "Kill the immigrants, kill the immigrant, kill the immigrant," over and over again. A vacation Bible school. This is the opposite of any vacation Bible school in which I've ever participated or helped lead. The horror of that story is just unimaginable on the earth plane, let alone higher planes of consciousness. I'd like to contrast this with what the universe gave me this morning in response to that, and also with what Jesus, known as Jesus Christ, Yeshua, and Mary Magdalene, Miriam Magdala, channeled through me in our group Sunday morning. We do have a recording of what Yeshua and Miriam Magdala channeled through me on Sunday morning, but they spoke directly to some of the people in the circle, so I have no intention of violating their privacy and putting this video out into the world. If you join the circle and are, bring love and respect and support the way I ask everyone to, then it's possible that we might share that video with you, but I'll have to get the permission of the people who are there. So this morning, after I watched that video, thanks to Papa Redneck, or Redneck Papa on Instagram, and I don't know if he or whichever parent was objecting or not, but I felt so concerned. I tuned in and asked for, what's the message here that needs to be brought? I'm not going to say in opposition to that, but in invitation to respond to that video in a completely different mental, theological, philosophical, psychospiritual framework. I hope you're with me. I know I'm talking slowly, but this has got to get out. It's what came to me, and hopefully now through me, is that the issue humanity has had for several thousand years is othering people. And it started with what Anne Baring and Jules Cashford describe in the Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image, as they describe it as a split in the human psyche where the sacred or the feminine was relegated into the unconscious mind. So the first split was between feminine and masculine. The next split, really, the essential aspect of that split is between self and other, self and world. If you think about indigenous peoples who still live with their indigenous wisdom, they don't inherently make that split. Self is part of world, other selves are part of a whole self, we're part of a whole self. That split isn't made. When we attain higher consciousness, the same thing occurs. We're not separate from the dimensions of this universe. We're not separate from the multiple dimensions of consciousness that exist, and we're no longer separate from nature. We're no longer separate from one another. So it is that creating the other that leads to the second huge problem. Well, the second huge problem is the shutting down of the sacred feminine consciousness within us and within nature. But the third big problem is then the other can too often become the enemy. And what came to me is we need to remember that if we're seeing an enemy out here, that's because there's an enemy within us. There's some part of ourselves that is acting as if someone is an enemy, or acting as if we're an enemy of our own higher selves. I know that may be hard to grasp. Let me see if I can explain it in a couple different modes. One of the ancient ways of seeing this or expressing this is the inner cosmos creates the outer cosmos. Another way of saying is as within, so without. In other words, the reality of consciousness and subtle energies of consciousness that we experience inside ourselves, which we can tune into by feeling how we feel, whether we're feeling loving, peaceful, whether we're feeling generous, blissful, whether we're feeling clear and vibrantly alive. Those felt states help us tune into what is our inner cosmos doing. Okay? It's not just the thoughts, it is the thoughts too. But those felt states help us realize whether or not we're feeling part of the larger self instead of separating out others and enemies. And if we're experiencing those enemies or problems, or appear to be problems outside of us, they're really challenges, and I'll come back to that, then we need to look within and see what is the enemy within, what is the challenge within, where am I thinking that there's a problem, and why am I thinking there's a problem? Thinking that things are problems is a habit. It's partly cultural, it's partly ego. We don't have to think of anyone or anything else as a problem. We definitely have no reason to think of enemies or other human beings as enemies. Even in the biblical Gospels, Yeshua as Christ is quoted as saying, love your enemies, pray for them, do not persecute them. So what we were seeing in that church sanctuary in front of children, oh dear God, have mercy on our souls, all of our souls, we're all one on the soul level, was the enemizing or creating an enemy of somebody else and the persecution of that person instead of Christ's teachings. And what struck me was then the pastor was interviewed because people had complained, and he's saying, we're doing God's calling and we're, fighting the enemies. Well, the only enemy to fight is the enemy within. Another way to express this is in terms of the principle of the spiritual mirror. Whatever we're seeing in others reflects back something in ourselves. Another way to express this is in Islam. Yes, in Islam. Way back in the early 2000s, when we in the USA were all concerned about lovingly or judgmentally, take your pick, whatever we were doing back then, about Muslims and Islam here in America after 9/11, I got to go to a workshop in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The workshop was taught by a Muslim professor at whatever university there in Grand Rapids. There's more than one, I'm sure. And he did a beautiful job of talking about how Islam has the greater jihad and the lesser jihad. The lesser jihad is the one most of us are familiar with in the West, where Muslims get all violent with other people and they're fighting the infidel. In other words, they're engaging that same thing this Christian group was doing. They're fighting the enemy outside themselves, the supposed enemy. That's the problem. The greater jihad is completely different than the lesser jihad, this Islamic professor explained. He said the greater jihad is the struggle between goodness and evil within ourselves. That's the call to higher consciousness. So many people in the world are still living at this lower consciousness level of thinking the enemy is outside us. That's not the truth. If we've got some kind of lower vibrational consciousness and conflict going on inside ourselves, a lack of trust, lack of trusting source, whatever it may be, lack of loving ourselves, lack of loving others, which only comes when we're lacking, unable to truly love ourselves, unable to love source and unable to trust ourselves and unable to trust source, then we create the problems out here. We perceive them as out here. But even that term, the greater jihad, is like what Christ was saying. Love the ones out there. And Christ also said, Yeshua, if we want to switch to the metaphysical book study term for Jesus Christ, Yeshua taught and still teaches, love the enemy within, and then you can love the enemy without. So heal within, find the love within, bring the love within, overcome the evil in our inside ourselves. The only evil is the lack of love. Wherever there is no love, the opposite of pure divine intentions occurs. The opposite of loving intentions occur. Love is the field in which the universe exists. Love is the field of consciousness and subtle energies of consciousness that permeates the universe and in which the universe exists. Without this greater field, this Akashic field of love, as the womb of the universe would never exist. Nothing would come into being. What sustains beings in the universe? Love, wisdom, peace, hope, trust. Trust in the larger self of the universe. Trust in God, source, spirit, by whatever name you prefer to address ultimate being itself. I like being itself because I believe that there's no divinity that is a deity. It's just being itself that is divine, that is sacred, that is spirit, that is the consciousness and the subtle energies of consciousness we seek. And what do I mean by those subtle energies of consciousness? In this case, I mean the love, peace, and bliss, the feeling state, the energies of love, peace, and bliss. Those are what we all long for, and those are what we all need, along with hope. And the energy of trust. When we fully trust, everything in ourselves relaxes and becomes one with the potential, pure, sacred potential of experiencing all as well in ourselves, through ourselves, and around ourselves. So what happened on Sunday at the metaphysical book study? Well, Jesus and Mary Magdalene both showed up and channeled messages to me before the experience, and then they channeled during the metaphysical book study in Akashic Awakening Circle. As I said, we recorded that. One of the first points that Yeshua, or Jesus, said to me was, there are no dividing lines between humans. When we think about this church experience, Vacation Bible School for Children, and their armed people in battle fatigues shooting at another human being with blanks or whatever made the popping sounds, and the person is, flopping around as though they're being shot to death and then pulled out of the sanctuary. Yes, it really wasn't a sanctuary, was it? It was supposed to be. Whereas Jesus and, throwing out the money changers, I'm pretty sure we know that Jesus would have stopped this, in the middle of it. If he had shown up, he would have stopped it. There are no dividing lines between humans. There's no immigrant who's othered our souls all emigrate here to earth, right? Our souls all come down to earth from the divine, from source, from being itself, from the causal plane, the astral plane, whatever, well, really it's the astral, originally the causal plane, then astral planes. We come here to be human. We're all immigrants on this earth plane. We're all immigrants on this earth plane. There are no dividing lines. And then Yeshua lovingly stated that the whole idea of being part of a nation was to learn how to be part of a group instead of an individual self. And then part of what Yeshua channeled through me was that we're just nodes in the interconnected consciousness of being. We think of ourselves as separate beings, but we're just nodes. It was like he was talking about axons and dendrites, and I was seeing them, and we're just little nodes. We're just little signal centers of consciousness in the larger signaling of consciousness in the universe. And we need to be able to know how to listen to all the other signal nodes of consciousness. So all other human beings as one. So the nation represents that idea of oneness, but on a very limited scale. So if we draw dividing lines between ourselves and other human beings from nation to nation, we're doing the opposite of what Yeshua taught on Sunday morning. And Mary Magdalene came in, and she reminded me, and through me, spoke to the others about this vision that I had once, in which Yeshua and Mary Magdalene gave me the Sacred Heart of God. That's how the language I thought of it at that point. And Mary Magdalene on Sunday, and honestly, I don't remember if they talked about the vision. I was channeling. It's hard for me to remember. Anyway, I connected it with the vision in which Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, way back in the fall of 2009, had given me the Sacred Heart of God. And later in May 2010, I had a vision where I knew that the message is to become the Sacred Heart of God. And what Mary Magdalene said to us on Sunday was, before you talk with somebody else, hold their heart in your own hands. Hold their heart in your hands, as if you're holding the Sacred Heart of God in your hands. And be the Sacred Heart of God for them. Be the Sacred Heart of God, holding their heart in the hands of the Sacred Heart of God. The message is really be the Sacred Heart and hold everyone's heart in your hands as if their heart is also part of the Sacred Heart of God. Because it is. On the soul level, we're one. On the soul level, we're never othering people, creating enemies outside ourselves. On the soul level, we're connecting in love in the one Sacred Heart. And I believe it was Mary Magdalene, maybe it was Yeshua on Sunday, who channeled through me that just as philosophers of some religions say there's only one self, myself included, there's only one heart. There's only one heart. And that is what I'd like to leave you with. The heart of all the children in that Vacation Bible School, the heart of the person playing the immigrant, the heart of the men shooting at the immigrant, the heart of the pastor who's in this lower vibration consciousness of othering and creating enemies. All of our hearts are part of the one heart in this universe. We could think of the universe as one big heart. As the heart of God, the womb of God, the mind of God, all of those metaphors speak to the deeper metaphysical reality of who we are as part of the larger reality. And science can't get at this until it stops depending only on mechanical, physical measurements of what is. Even mathematical measurements, looking at where does the beauty of math, where does the intelligence of math comes from, starts to get us in the direction of the heart of God. It starts to get us in the direction of the mind of God. But how does beauty occur? Beauty, even in mathematical equations, doesn't just occur from pure intelligence. It occurs through heart. Mind and heart and womb together form the universe in which we reside as part of that universe. We are here, not only within the heart of God, with the mind of God, within the womb of the goddess. We are here to be the presence of the sacred heart of God with one another. May it be so. Thank you.